following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network. Imagine a place where mental health, resilience, sports, and the power to never give up all come together. This show is about life. It's about mental health. It's about bouncing back stronger than ever. This is Reset and Rise to the Unbreakable with Amanda Moore.
Hey guys, welcome back to Reset and Rise to the Unbreakable with Amanda Moore. I am your host, Rob Francois. This is episode number 22, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Amanda Moore. Good evening.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good.
It's almost Christmas time. You ready?
No. I'm not, actually. I still have some presents to get, and working retail has made me loathe the holidays.
Yes, I know.
It's always that. Yeah, it's all the work and preparation to get to the holiday, and then the holiday goes super fast, and then it's the cleanup after the holiday. And This is the last big holiday until, I guess, New Year's Eve, and then Super Bowl, because in my industry, the Super Bowl is a big seller. So.
It should be a holiday. I don't know why it's not, but in America, it should be at least. Yes.
Well, did you see where I think it was Mahomes tore his ACL, so he's out for the season. A lot of people are really excited about that, I guess. I don't know.
Unfortunate. No, I mean,
it was unfortunate. I never want anybody to get injured, but
I don't ever want to see anybody get hurt. But
me either.
The fact that he won't be in the playoffs this year, well, it's
not breaking a lot of people's hearts from what I see.
No.
So
I'm a Patriots fan, so I didn't want to see him in the playoffs anyway.
You know, I'll be honest, I haven't watched any professional football this year, but I'm a huge baseball fan. So I'm dying for baseball to come back.
Baseball starts March 25th next year.
The day after my birthday. I'm so excited.
That's just early to me. It's always an April thing. I don't know why they push it up early. Maybe
because baseball's the best. Duh.
Right.
That's why. And some people are like, I know people that are like, it's like watching paint dry. I'm like, go to a live baseball game. It's so fun. It's so different. Yeah.
And, different. Growing up in Connecticut, I used to go to Boston, to Fenway all the time, and that's my favorite place on earth. Just the smell, the hot dogs, and just the atmosphere. I mean, there's nothing like it. Yeah, it's true.
Well, and so I grew up in Clinton, Iowa, and we have a minor league baseball team called the Clinton Lumber Kings. So I was raised on baseball. We were there every Friday, Saturday, and some of those guys that were on the minor league teams went to the major leagues. That's pretty cool to see that happen. The advancement off of that. So. And then you get to meet the players before and after the game. And when you're a little kid, you're like, oh my gosh, you just think they're like these big stars. And so I was raised on baseball. So that's probably my favorite sport. But
I like it. I can respect that.
Yeah. So
who do we got today?
So today's episode is one that truly embodies service, resilience, and the purpose beyond the uniform. So I'm honored to welcome Robert Bob Yarnall, a retired Master Gunnery Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps, an educator, nonprofit leader, and a tireless advocate for veterans and their families. Bob he served 25 years for our country, deployed in support of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, spent years shaping future Marines through recruiting, and dedicated nearly 2 decades to educating people and the minds as a civics teacher. Today, he serves as the vice president of the development impact for the Robert Irvine Foundation, and he is also the leader of the Face the Fight initiative, bringing critical suicide prevention and mental health support to those who have served. So in this conversation, we're going to get to know Bob a little bit better, what he does with the Robert Irvine Foundation and the Face the Fight initiative. We talked to him a little bit prior to the show about a couple of those things and just get to know him. He's an all-around good person. He's got his hands in a lot of different things, and he's a very accomplished Marine. So if you want to, we can bring him in.
All right, everybody, please welcome Bob Yarnall. Bob, good evening, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Bob, I just wanted to start by, if you want to give a little depiction of your time serving in the Marines, and what all you accomplished there, and then streamline that into how you got started with Robert Irvine Foundation.
Sure. Well, obviously in high school, I looked at it as a path. I applied originally to the JROTC program or NROTC program, trying to get into school. 20 years later, I met the person who actually got the scholarship. We sat across from each other in cubicles in Quantico. He scored 20 points higher on the SATs and went to Villanova. I went to Paris Island. I don't regret that at all, though. I spent the first 5 years of my career doing logistics and embarkation with the helicopter unit out in Tustin. I had the privilege of being right out there by the base here. About a week ago, we were doing some work with some veterans in Santa Ana. Unfortunately, the hangar where I was first stationed out there was one of the largest wooden structures in the U.S., burned down about a year ago. So it's just the shell of it still sits there now. But great place to start your young military career as a 18-year-old, 10 minutes from the beach in Southern California, not a bad place. Spent the first 5 years there, got deployed on a Westpac, wound up instead of going to Australia, we took a hard right and spent 102 straight days doing circle squares and dropping anchor. Did some ship interdictions, waiting for Desert Storm to actually start. In the process, came back to the Philippines, did some rework, picked up an extra battalion of Marines, and went back with a whole large group of, I think, there were 23 amphibious ships that went back and did our part during Desert Storm. Came back from that, got orders on recruiting duty, wound up getting asked to stay on recruiting duty. So I wound up doing that for 8 years, which is kind of what drove me into the next phase of my life, which was education. Had a really tough decision to make as our 3 younger boys were born. Do I go back and become a warrant officer? Do I stay here? Do I stay on recruiting duty, which was a 363-day-a-year job, or transition? So at that point, I transitioned into the reserves, went back to school, got my degree at night while I stayed home with my 3 younger boys during the day as a stay-at-home dad. As soon as I graduated, actually before I graduated from college, got activated for a year, ran a reserve unit up in the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area for a little bit over a year. Got off active duty from that, finished up my student teaching, got hired right away, taught for 6 months, got activated again for almost 2 years down at Quantico, where I wrote the draft manuscript for a book on the Battle of Fallujah. That was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. When I got there, I thought I was going to be a field historian traveling overseas and documenting what our units were doing in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I got there, they said, no, we'd like you to write a book on the Battle of Fallujah. I was like, well, I've never written more than a 64-page paper in college, but okay. Great learning experience. I met some fabulous people in the process. And I think it was one of the things that really amplified my career going forward with what I was doing. Learning that skill and working with the people I worked with there were fabulous. And I also did some secondary duties where I was asked to serve as a senior enlisted on the first critical incident stress management team the Marine Corps put together back in 2004. And that was dealing first real attempt to deal with mental health issues in our returning service members. The force chaplain asked me if I would do that, and certainly wasn't going to tell him no. So I went through a lot of suicide intervention and prevention training, the critical incident stress management, counselor training. I did that as a secondary piece, along with, I used to do readiness assessments on reserve units all over the country. So I got to work with those young Marines at 90% who joined, not if they were going to go to combat, but when they were going to go to combat. So when people ask me, how does today's Marine compare to, the greatest generation? I'm like, you got to look at it. When we got attacked, they came out, they joined knowing that they were going to go to war. They weren't shying away from that. So I think, this generation is just as worthy as our past generations. They still maintain that same desire to serve and protect.
Yeah. So how did your 25 years in the Marine Corps shape the man and the leader that you are today?
It absolutely was the best foundation I could have asked for. I ought to say, I went through college. I graduated with the 4.0. I would have never done that had I gone to college out of high school. I knew I was there. I had my purpose. I had my focus on what I really wanted to accomplish with that. And it was a discipline that I learned in the Marine Corps. But even into teaching, what I used in the classroom, 90% of that was what I brought with me from the Marine Corps versus what I gained in knowledge in college. I had some fabulous leaders, and I always say it was that first duty station that made the biggest difference in my career as I reflected back on it. A lot of times when you get a young service member comes in for their first duty station, the first thing that happens is, oh, well, we need somebody to go to mess duty to work in the chow hall, or we need somebody to go to guard duty, or somebody to go be a duty driver somewhere. So you come in, you don't even, you just got out of school, you learned about 40% of what you know, it's fresh, you're motivated. Next thing you know, you're getting sent to the chow hall for 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, whatever it might be. Well, now you're losing half of what that 40% that you learned. Plus, you weren't made to feel part of a family. You were kind of like, oh, I'm here and now I'm sent off somewhere else. And that didn't happen to me. I feel very fortunate. I was taken under the wing by a great sergeant and a great master sergeant that I worked with, and a couple of the warrant officers. They taught me. I was willing to learn, but they taught me. I learned how to do things at a young age in the Marine Corps, that I was going to courses where I was sitting in with staff NCOs and officers, your higher enlisted ranks and officers, in courses, and I was getting my certifications very early in my career, which then set me up for faster promotions, meritorious promotions, and that just continued. I just felt like I had some exceptional leaders that taught me different phases of leadership in life as I went through, and I got older, learning that not to get so excited when something seems like it's a crisis. Take it in, digest it. Okay, what's the plan of action, and then go forward rather than getting all excited about it and you're not focused on it. So I feel very fortunate for that, that lessons that I was able to learn throughout my career, and every step of the way. Recruiting duty, the same thing was, I had a great boss there that taught me, look, you are going to make a great impact on people beyond what you'll ever know sometimes. And I was fortunate, again, I got to learn that. I talked to a young man. He didn't wind up joining the Marine Corps, but I ran into his mom at my ex-mother-in-law's retirement ceremony. She said, I just want to thank you. I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, you talked to my son. And he was sitting on the couch doing nothing. He had his master's degree. I told him he should come talk to you. He's like, I'm not joining the military, let alone the Marines. But he came and talked to you. You talked to him. You mapped out a plan for him. He came home. He said, look, if I don't have a job within the next 30 days, I'm going back and joining the Marines. Lo and behold, he got a financial job at that 28-day mark, but it propelled him to get off the couch and do what he was doing. And she said, thank you, because you changed his direction. And that's something you don't always get to know. You don't know how many people you've touched, but know that you are and continue to do what you're doing and impact as many people as you can along the way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You deployed with the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. What lessons from that experience still guide you today?
It's one, don't take any day for granted. We had two of our Hueys collided, and we lost 8 of our crew members in nighttime operations over the Gulf of Oman. And we used to sit up on the deck above the flight deck. It was because you were in general quarters most of the times, and that means all your hatches are closed. And people are like, oh, you were out on a ship, you had it good. Well, keep in mind, it's 115 to 120 degrees. You're on the water with that water reflecting. You get a flat black roof and no air conditioning. It's like a sauna. So we used to sit up there and mail call. You didn't have cell phones. You didn't have sat phones. You got your mail, slow mail, and sometimes it would go from one ship over to ours, and it would drop in the water, and that mail would be gone. But that day we had gotten mail, and one of our Marines, he just got selected for promotion to staff sergeant, a good friend of ours, just got done showing us pictures of his baby girl who was born after we had deployed. And my buddy and I, we were on flight deck watch, and he was up flying, and they collided in a huge fireball. We never recovered any of the bodies. So that, take every moment and be present and appreciate it, because that moment could be gone tomorrow, and it could happen to anybody. And I think that really changed how I looked at every day of my life. Is every day be appreciative for what I have, be grateful for what I have, take advantage of the time that you have with those around you that you care about, because tomorrow they might not be there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it difficult for you to transition from active duty to reserves and then to civilian roles, such as what you're doing now?
I think I was fortunate in that, because of being on recruiting duty for 8 years, that really helped me make that transition, because you kind of had to be able to put military jargon into civilian terminology when you're talking to people. And I just became very well connected where I was recruiting. I started in one area, and then I went back actually to what would have been my hometown region, where I actually got recruited out of. So I had those 2 counties, and then came back and took over the region where I originally started. It was an 8-county region as the senior enlisted staff NCOIC of that region. So I coached youth league sports. I was involved with the Cancer Society. I was involved with Toys for Tots. I knew a lot of the folks just because of the engagement that I did in the community. So when I transitioned into the reserves, I had a focus when I was doing that. I knew I was going to go back to school. I knew what that second career was going to be. And I had already had strong ties in the community. So that, I think, for a lot of people, if you're transitioning out from, say, Camp Lejeune or Okinawa, and you're coming back and you're trying to transition back to an area that you haven't been in for a long time, and you don't have those connections, that transition is one of the hardest things most people have in the military. Just because, whether you're a young military family, your spouse hasn't been employed, so you're dealing with financial hardship to begin with, and you really don't take those necessary steps a lot of times to prep for that transition. I stayed where I was living, where I was recruiting. So I had already been established in that region. Family was there, a lot of friends, a lot of connections. So it made it fairly easy. Literally as soon as I got done school, I had a job before I completed my degree. I was already hired to teach at the school that I was at, and had 2 other offers. So I was very fortunate. And some of those were because of connections that I had prior to leaving the military.
Yeah. Do you think there's parallels between being a Marine leader and being an educator in the classroom?
Oh, absolutely. I used to have a lot of teachers like, how come you don't have any problems with discipline in your room? I'm like, because I expect nothing but good discipline. It's how you carry yourself when you walk into the room.
I was just going to say, not to mention the way you look, you're very stoic, like not going to take any BS from anybody type.
And it's funny because as kids get to know you, like I used to spend 1 day a week where I would work with the students on personal and professional development. Civics is great. Learning all that is great, but what kind of things are going to carry you over beyond just education? And I've always prided myself when I've had students come up, I might not have learned a lot about history, but I learned a lot about life in your class. Victory. If that's what you took away, great. But it definitely is like, how do you treat people? Just standing there yelling at somebody isn't the way you lead. That's a lot of people think that about, especially the Marine Corps. No, I love that in the Marine Corps, you were taught self-discipline. So you did what you needed to do without being told. It was always next man up mentality. So teach your people that are working for you. I always used to say, it's not just doing it because I told you to do it. Here's why we're doing it. Now, I might not always have that time to explain it, but if I have the opportunity, I'll come back and explain why we were doing something, why we were doing it that way, so that you learn from that and can build your leadership. Because bottom line is, we always have to be able to step into that role, because in the military, people are constantly rolling out. So you have to be able to step up into that leadership role. And if nobody's ever taught you about what they're doing, it makes it very difficult. So if I can teach you how to do it and explain to you why, and I use that same exact role in my classroom, like, this is why I'm teaching you this. This is how it's going to relate to you down the road. I taught it in Career and Tech Center. I taught civics. But when you're talking to people that are, I always use Robert's example when he had to show Restaurant Impossible. What are your food costs? Knowing your food cost is important. Well, if you're in carpentry, you need to know those 3 same types of costs. what's your overhead, what's your material cost, what's your labor cost? Because if you don't, how do you begin to give somebody an estimate for a job? So teaching them the essence behind why you are doing what you're doing, understanding small, local government. You need to understand zoning laws, zoning hearing boards, planning commissions, things of that nature, because they're relevant for most of the fields that you're going into coming out of a career tech center. I totally used a lot of what I learned leadership wise in the Marine Corps and use that same thing in the classroom. To me, it fit very well. And I think back to when I had a Marine health teacher in high school. He was one of the best teachers I had, just because it was, this is the way it is. This is how we do things. And there was really no other option to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that being said, working with young people or the younger generation, what do you think the young people of today need most in terms of mentorship and guidance that they're missing out on or lacking?
Just what you said, mentorship and guidance. Many of them don't have any at home. That is the one thing. I think it's what helped me a lot in teaching is having been on recruiting duty. I was in so many of those homes, and you see, the one student who used to fall asleep in class and get in trouble. Well, when you know that the reason he's fallen asleep is his dad's a firefighter in New York, mom abandoned the family with 2 younger kids and a teenager. Well, the teenager made sure the kids got fed, they got bathed before I ever sat down to get his homework done. He got up early in the morning. He had to get the kids ready for school. And of course, the kid's tired. He's going to fall asleep. So knowing that these kids don't have that at home for many of them, whether your parents are commuting long distances or both parents are working or there's only one parent, what's the babysitter a lot of times? Video games, phones, iPads. I mean, you see it when you go out to eat. Kids 2 years old sitting on an iPad. Are they getting mentored? Do they have somebody that sees them?
Yeah.
Kids.
Well, it doesn't help when you see parents out to dinner and they're on their cell phones, whether they're on a date or with their children. They're not really actively paying attention. So
kids love nothing more than to be seen and heard. They're kids. They're no different than they were. When people complain about kids, I say, look in the mirror. You created it. Kids are products of their environment. And when you give them a purpose, I used to have them do community service, and we used to do community projects through our civics class. When you would get kids going down into our horticulture and learning how to grow plants. We grow basil and, garlic and all the different herbs that we would then send out to our local food markets and food pantries. So they'd have a fresh herb to go home. Our kids would create recipes. They do cooking demonstrations of how to cook that. The kids in the horticulture would show how to maintain the plants so they didn't flower and things like that. And when they did, you'd think you just won the lottery. Those kids got so excited because they were given back and they were learning something that nobody had ever taught them or took the time to teach. To sit down and have a conversation with a kid. Hey, when I talk about doing personal development, my gosh, teaching them about mindfulness and, just how to change their trajectories. And they really, really adapt to that when somebody takes the time to just be present with them.
Yeah. So we're going to, was it Marines or nothing when you were 18? Well, I mean, I guess
legitimate question. Did you have any other options or?
Oh, I did. I was in National Honor Society, played baseball. Scavenge from the Toronto Blue Jays, the phenom rookie. He played in Boyertown. I have a long history of baseball. It's an American Legion mecca for baseball. But certainly, college was an option. I went to trade school as well, so I could have gone into carpentry and done that. But I wanted something that was going to challenge me. I got through high school, did very well. But I don't feel like I really challenged myself. And this was a way of doing that. And I had a cousin who served 2 tours in Vietnam, actually wound up being my boss at one point in my Marine Corps career as colonel. it just was he was kind of my role model growing up for me. So, that was kind of the direction that if I was going to do it, that was the direction I wanted to go. And it just was something that I actually went into it looking at it. This is going to be my career. I said,
Yeah.
I've also learned that never's a long time, because I said I was never going to go to college. And I said I would never run a marathon.
You and your wife just completed didn't you just complete a marathon or something like that, or a ruck run?
She got me to do a marathon, and she said, well, she's done 5. She said, well, if we're going to do it, the Marine Corps has a whole Marine Corps marathon race series, which the good thing about that is it keeps you training, but it's like a 1775, a 10K, an 8K, 12K, half marathon. You do all these races. She said, well, you get an extra piece of bling at the end. But we do also do like a 52 week hike challenge, but we've been doing that. I think we're on year 5 now, where we get out and do at least 3 miles, at least an hour every week is a challenge. And we're getting ready to we take, we took 65 this year. We're going to take 100 veterans on what's called the Cateran Yomp. They say 22, but everybody kind of clocked it in between 25 and 26 miles, 36 or 54 miles in the Scottish Highlands in 24 hours.
Wow.
And the outcome of that is, I say it's taking boot camp or officer candidate school and it's compressing it into 4 days, because the outcomes of that, the change in, even 2 of very good friends of mine that on camera talked about their experience and what it did for their mental health. Ran into one of our participants at the Eagle Salute to Service game 2 weeks ago, and she talked about how it changed the trajectory of her life and how she looks at things now. And it's just the lifelong friendships that were built there. And I mean, it's a physical challenge, it's a mental challenge, but you're doing it with some great people, and just an amazing thing. But once you've done the one, it's done a century ride, done Spartans. It's not a matter of can you, it's a matter of will you.
Yeah. I used to do endurance running. So when you talk about what it does for you and the mindset shift that it does, and then the bonds that you create with people that have the like-minded capabilities, and then you're always trying to challenge yourself. I totally understand where you're coming from on that. So you guys are very inspirational for me. I'm vicariously living through some of your adventures right now. So it's fun.
Me too, because I'll never run a marathon. I only run after the ice cream truck. So that's about it. Yeah.
But I ran the 10K in 2017, and we did it with Semper Fi America's Fund. So you're doing it with the wounded veterans. And I'll never forget, I cramped. I was my best 10K time that I was headed for, and I cramped up. And next thing I know, a double amputee goes past me. It's like, okay, suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah, really.
That's like,
you get back, and he had just gotten one of the guys just had gotten a new prosthetic. Probably shouldn't have been running on it, but didn't have his wrap moleskin, pulled off his leg, and his nub was bloody. I'm like, man, how can I, then it became a mission that, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise money and be out there to support you guys, because you deserve that.
We had an amputee on our show, Aaron Smith, and the stuff that he does being an amputee is mind blowing, because there are some people that don't have that issue and they still find ways to make excuses to not go after things in life. So it's very inspirational.
The folks we have in the foundation motivate me every day. I work with Mike Schlitz, who he's a double arm amputee, burned over 85% of his body. He's gone through over 100 surgeries. And I don't know anybody more dedicated to helping others. And he always talks about it like, I live my life for the guys who didn't make it.
Wow.
And we've got a whole crew of folks that we work with that, and just come across all the time. And to me, that's what gets me out of bed every morning, is what can I do? And I don't like the story of veterans are all broken, because they're not.
No, that's not true.
Some need a little bit of a lift up, and they're dealing with some things. But I always, whenever I talk to a group of veterans, I always remind them, look, you're a 1%er. Less than 1% of this country will ever put on a uniform. let alone attempt to join and make it through boot camp or officer candidate school and wear that uniform. And to put that in perspective, less than 1% will ever complete a marathon. Less than 1% will ever earn that title doctor. Less than 1% will ever write a book. Like less than 1% will become a Division I athlete. That's the crew you're with. So even if you're down right now, you've already proven to yourself that you can achieve at that level. So pick yourself up and let's go. If you need a little bit of assistance, nothing wrong with that. But you've got the ability because you've already proven you have that. And there's so many great examples of folks out there that are thriving even with their, whether it was amputee, traumatic brain injuries. There's some that are still struggling. And look, a lot of those wounds you don't see. And that's the challenge is, Mike tells people this all the time is, look, when I walk into a room, he could walk in next to me and you wouldn't know that he's dealing with traumatic brain injury because he doesn't have any outward signs of that, but doesn't have any short-term memory or doesn't have any long-term memory, or, there's multiple different factors that come into that, it's unfortunate, but that's the truth with it. And, but veterans are, the veterans that I've worked with throughout my careers, some of the best people I've ever worked with, and they're the folks that get things done. So.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, veterans always put the matter of life in deep perspective of why it's so important to be more optimistic than pessimistic, because everybody's fighting battles that you can't necessarily see or that they want to talk about. So then when people complain or decide to spread negativity about things that really shouldn't matter as much because it's not anything, it's either something that's out of your control and is already going to happen regardless of what you do or think. It's just, for me,
Guilty.
I love having veterans on this show, but I just love all the veterans that I have on my Facebook following. They all have amazing stories, and not one of them have a woe is me, feel sorry for me, or my life is in shambles upon the return. They all try to do something positive and inspirational with their story, no matter if they're a decorated officer or if they are just still serving or whatever they're deciding to do with nonprofit organizations as well. So I also wanted to get into talking to you about you're the Vice President of Development and Impact at the Robert Irvine Foundation. And for people that don't know, Robert Irvine, to kind of mention it, but he had the show Restaurant Impossible, a very good show. And he also does the Fit Crunch protein bars. I'm guilty of having a few of those in my day. Very buff, very, very buff, and very stoic, very poised man. So how did you meet him? And with that being said, in your role as that, what does the meaning of impact in that mean for you?
Well, first off, I just changed roles.
Okay.
And now the director of programs.
Okay.
Fortunate to have brought in a director of development person that I know very, very well and who is very, very talented, which allowed me to shift over into director of programs. Brought my wife on board as our director of development, so she handles all of the fundraising aspects. Robert is one. I've met two people that I think he and this other individual exemplify what it is to support our veteran community. I remember sitting at the Marine Corps Museum having lunch with Oliver North, and he was talking about, coming off the back of a helicopter with a microphone versus an M16. And he was there getting ready to film a documentary on Korean War veterans. And his film crew came over and said, Mr. North, and he said, don't interrupt me when I'm talking to Marines.
Wow.
I was like, boom. And that's Robert. Like when he's dealing with whether it's on a base, dealing with their active duty and their families, let alone if it's the military kids. He's a big, tough guy. He's mush around the kids, though. Don't let him hear me say that, but he is. And with our veterans, like that is what fuels his passion and everything that he does, is taking care of those, whether it's our military, our veterans, our first responders, anybody that serves, and their families. Because when you serve, it's a family affair on multiple fronts. So getting involved with Robert, and he had started the foundation as a pass-through in 2020. 2021, really wanted to focus on programs where he felt needs weren't being met. And that's in the nutritional wellness, physical wellness, and the mental wellness of our veterans and our active duty. I know they just did a special on CBS because he's revamping the way the Army feeds our troops right now. We have an obesity issue on our active duty side of our military, and part of it is because they're not being fed properly. If they do have a chow hall or dining facility on base, troops aren't eating there because the food is crap. It's like Robert said, it's kind of like going into a prison, how rigid and stuff it is. It's not welcoming. So you go into a college dining facility and it's fabulous. You go into the military and it sucks. And it's not fresh food. It's not what they need to fuel their bodies. So he's working very hard on changing that. And we have a couple pilot programs on bases right now, testing this particular model out. And then if that works, then you expand it force wide.
Real quick, that's amazing to me. Like, how did that happen?
I can't tell you. I retired in 2011, but I've been on a couple bases where they didn't have functioning chow halls now, or the chow halls aren't, they're only open certain hours. Well, that doesn't do your night shift guys or gals any good.
I mean, they're elite. I mean, they need all their sustenance. I mean, they need to perform. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And that's got to be a priority. You've got to fuel the force to be able to accomplish the mission. Yeah. And we're working on that from the foundation side too. Is we have a food truck program. So we have food truck. The people that come into the food truck program are either have some culinary training, or we provide a culinary training all the way through designing their business, and then they operate their business out of one of our food trucks. So our food truck fellows, many of them are great chefs already. We're just helping them with their business. So between them and Robert's team of chefs, when we go into a military installation and do a Breaking Bread with Heroes with them, providing demonstrations of here's how you can cook healthier. Given the food, 24% of our young military families are food insecure and getting assistance through food pantries. So here's the food you're getting. How can you cook it healthier, more nutritious, and more flavorful in a simple way, so that they're more likely to do that rather than DoorDash or grabbing crap at KFC or Taco Bell or the processed foods, at the gas station. That's a twofold whammy. One, it leads to the obesity issue, but two, it also is very expensive. If you can learn to cook, at least a handful of your meals a week at home, it's healthier. It's going to save you a ton of money, which will solve two of the issues.
Are they not held to certain standards in regards to like PT tests, or like we have a guy commenting, Craig, about when he was in the military, they were really strict about BMIs.
I can tell you, I'm not there right now anymore, but I was at a wellness seminar where this was being discussed, and there were people from each branch of the military. The Marine Corps has held, but we've always maintained that pretty strict standard on that. I was sitting next to a sergeant major that runs our 8th and I, which is the silent drill team, and our honor guard for funerals at Arlington. We both are like, this sounds like a small unit leadership issue. Like, get your people out, PT, make sure they're maintaining. And it's not that some people aren't going to struggle, but how do you, when you look at the rates it really took off during COVID and hasn't come back. It's just blossomed after COVID. So I can't speak for the other branches because I don't know what they're doing. I just know what the Marine Corps has, just from my connections in the Marine Corps. They haven't changed their standards at all. And it's the same for men and women, and they have to meet those standards. Otherwise, you get put on a program, and you have so much time to get back into standards, or you'll get processed out.
If war ever broke out and they got to get deployed, what are you going to do when you have a bunch of obese soldiers running around that get winded and can't stay focused? I'm being a bigger guy. I'm a civilian, I don't have to worry about that, but I can't imagine the best of the best.
Don't get me wrong. Our special force guys, they're on special diets. They have.
No, sure. Yeah, I get that. No, yeah.
But the average, and I've heard the argument too. And look, if you're sitting in a room flying a drone out in the deserts of Nevada, is it is important that you can run 3 miles. There's going to be people, I'm not advocating one way or the other, but there's going to be people that say, you know what, that person doesn't need to, but that, if you're driving a truck or you're an infantry guy, there is no such thing as the front lines anymore.
Right.
If you're running convoys and you're getting ambushed, you got to be able to defend yourself and those around you. So, where do you say, oh, you don't need it or you do need it? I think everybody should be, but I'm not the one making those decisions. That's that's somebody in much higher places than I ever was, and I am no longer there. Do I have concerns? Can we help try and be a part of solving that problem? Absolutely. If we can provide that that training and teach some of our young military families how to do this and do it on a budget, and Robert can get changing that trajectory for our bases, great. And I know there's been talk, well, we need to do this broader. Well, Robert says you've got to test it out to make sure it's going to work before you dump all this money into it. Make sure it's going to work, make the adjustments, and then you take it force-wide, but test this first. And that just makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, aside from the Robert Irvine Foundation, you also lead the foundation's Face the Fight initiative, which integrates suicide intervention strategies. Why is that mission so personal and urgent to you?
Well, first off, I don't talk 22 day or anything like that because nobody really knows. There's figures thrown out there. All I can tell you is we lost about approximately 5,000 in combat in 20 years between Iraq and Afghanistan. We've lost 125,000 documented to suicide since 2003. That number is probably much higher because that's those that are documented. Mm-hmm. So averaging 6,000 a year, that number hasn't gone down. So I applaud it. Face the Fight was put together by USAA, Reach Resilience, and Humana. And what they wanted to do was pair up the clinical piece, evidence-based, with peers, because peers are more likely to listen to peers. So what we do is we work with veterans all over the country. We actually work with active duty folks too, and first responders, because they have a pretty high rate of suicide as well. We do what's called crisis response planning. We don't call it that because you say crisis veteran, oh, I'm not in crisis, I don't need that crap. But it's really what it is a bad day plan. And it's a self-management tool. It's easy to teach. It's easy to put together. And it's that tool that recognizes what your stressors are. It might be that what makes you angry. It might be what depresses you. What kind of will you go out and run? Will you go out and listen to heavy metal? Will you take your dog for a walk? What is it that helps you? And I always say, look, when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I get enraged, especially if my family's with me. And what I've gone to is that somebody has a medical emergency, they need to get somewhere. It's like an immediate diffusion of that anger. And that's just one simple example. But then it's providing those basic resources that they can do themselves. We talk about lethal means safety because one of the reasons veteran suicide is so much higher, and you really see this in the female side, is because veterans typically they have access, and two, they use weapons. We do a thing we call it a buddy check magnet. It can serve two purposes. It's one of those things you can put it in your gun box, or if you're going to keep your gun in a dresser drawer, I always stress, please don't do that. Put it in a gun box, lock it up, not just for your safety, but for others. And I'll explain that in a second. But you can put your buddy's number on there, the name and number on there, and that's a reminder to call them, somebody that you trust that you can call. It also works if you don't have any guns. It also works as a buddy check magnet. Hey, call that person that you might be worried about or you haven't heard. Put it on your refrigerator, and it's a reminder to call them once in a while.
That's great advice.
But I always say I lost a 14-year-old, 15 because he just turned 15, freshman football player of mine. I coached baseball for 27 seasons along with teaching. And I got a phone call in my classroom the one day, and originally when the person told me, I thought it was the young man's dad. He's like, no, it was young. I was like, you got to be kidding me. He was literally a Division I prospect in 3 sports, top 5% of his class, loved by everybody, was a best buddies mentor, just salt of the earth family, grew up hunting, knew all about weapon safety, and one day went out like he was going to school, but didn't go to school, waited till his parents left, went in, grabbed a gun, and died by suicide. So when people say, oh, I don't need to lock up, yes, you do. Because when you are in that crisis moment, you don't think rationally. And it's not just about you, it's about the ones you love. And the same could be said for medications. I lost two students, previous students, they were juniors at the time that they did this, but they went into her grandmother's medicine cabinet thinking they were going to get high, and that medication killed them both, because it wasn't secured. So that's just that simple thing of locking your weapon up and giving you, it's literally a 5 to 10 minute window where you're in that crisis, you're not thinking rationally, that if you can get through that, you are most likely going to be fine. Doesn't mean that you might not need some additional help. And people always say, well, I say the same thing. What worries me the most when people say they don't need this is, look, I have friends that I know are struggling and they're in counseling. They're going to continue to struggle probably. The ones I worry about are the ones that say, I don't need it, because I have heard, and I hear this almost every week practically. I either see somebody that I know, hear from somebody, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was just with so-and-so last week and they seem fine, and they're gone. Again, not everybody shows signs. Are there some warning signs with people? Yes. Somebody is giving away prized possessions, somebody is calling everybody in their phone tree one last time, but not everybody exhibits those signs. There's no set, and I've learned enough to know that so much goes back to childhood traumas that comes out in different ways. What's going to trigger that childhood trauma? We don't know, because it's something that has been packed away for years. And that I first had my experience with that when I was doing a critical incident stress management counseling, because worst thing they called them was debriefs. But as you were going around talking, I would always open up and talk about my experience of loss, which would usually open up the conversation. The ones that were struggling the most were ones that had something in their childhood that was a stressor. And that, if you read The Body Keeps Score, there's some great research that goes into just how much. I was like, man, I wish I had read this book before I taught, because like the kids that are cutting themselves, there's a reason for that. And it's not just, it's the one thing they feel. They're processing their trauma in a different way. And so much of what we see is that compounding with, whether you're dealing with moral injury, which a lot of people don't talk about. Moral injury is even more prevalent and harder to get people to talk about, because they had to do something that went against their moral makeup and they believe people are going to judge them. When you're talking PTSD, that's an incident. Okay, most people, and there's different ways of dealing with that types of trauma, and there are lots of great therapies and programs out there, and we're expanding some more, fortunately, finally. But the moral injury is one that people don't talk about a lot, and that is something that many, I always use the example, if you're a trauma nurse during COVID and you got to decide who gets the ventilator. That's a lot of trauma. You're deciding, you have to make that decision on who's living and dying, and you're the one in there where the family can't be. And I wouldn't want that responsibility. Best I can use to describe it. But there's definitely incidents that happen in the military and everywhere else where you have to make decisions sometimes that go against your moral makeup, or you had to do something that goes against your moral makeup, and you're afraid of how people are going to judge you. So
I'm going to touch on something with you just a second, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but when you're talking about the 14-year-old, I was trying to hold back tears. My dad fought in the Vietnam War in the Navy, and he committed suicide in 1988. And I'm still not sure to this day, he had use of a weapon, of a firearm. And we're still not sure to this day if it was due to PTSD from fighting war, or if it was other components from having manic bipolar disorder when he was diagnosed with that coming back from the war. In lieu of that, my sister and I, my sister committed suicide by handgun in 2019. She didn't serve, but the trauma as a child growing up with not knowing the truth about our father until we were older, she really had a hard time dealing with that for years and had threatened to commit suicide so many different ways, to the point she tried to overdose on Tylenol one time. I remember getting that call. She dated a guy that had taught her how to use a handgun that he kept in the nightstand drawer. Had she not had that opportunity to have an easy out, I think she would still be alive, to be quite honest with you. And many people, when she passed, said it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. I don't honestly believe that. I think her prior attempts were cries for help, that she never found the satisfactory tool to get the right, reasonable help. Going to a mental institute that brings people in and puts them back out on the street 3 to 5 days if they have good behavior or show signs of improvement, to me is not enough. That's for civilians or veterans. It's not enough either way you look at it. But when you talk about handguns being in the nightstands, that is the exact way both my father and my sister passed away. So that is very good advice that you gave. And so I hope anybody that's listening actually follows through with that piece of advice. That is something for me. Those 2 deaths will affect me for the rest of my life. So mental health for me is a very, very important component in my life, to where I'm very advantageous and very in the know about my mental health. The minute that I think or feel something is off, I have 2 people I know I can call and talk to, and they'll talk me through it. And so when people say I don't have anybody, that's not true. You always have somebody. There's always somebody that'll listen. When you're in a moment of distress, like you talked about, sometimes that distress moment can last for 5 minutes to 20 minutes. If you compound using drugs and alcohol on top of that, it's going to take you to a whole other level. And unfortunately, both my sister and father were either high on some type of drug or drunk at the time, beyond the legal limit, when they committed suicide. So I just want to make it very clear to everybody out there that the information that you're giving with the foundation that you lead is very, very important. So I just wanted to share that, because it is facts. And I do think this whole, I think the misconceptions that people have about veterans when they come back, and suicide surrounding veterans, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And the 22 a day, I don't know where that got started or who got that number, but we don't, like you said, we don't know that that's the number for sure. I think that's just something out there to grab people's attention, in a sense. But yeah, so that I think the biggest thing that grabs me with you, my attention to you, is the foundation with Face the Fight initiative. For me, that's something that's near and dear to my heart. But I did want to ask you, what are your thoughts on what misconceptions do you have in your opinion on suicide prevention among veterans?
I think that some people have this idea, well, if they didn't have the gun, they'd find another way. No, when they're in that moment, they have a plan. That's what they're going to execute. If they can't execute, they don't. I mean, there's plenty of evidence. The stuff that we're doing is based on evidence. We're not just coming up, and I'm not the expert. I've been through a lot of the different training. I've done multiple suicide intervention courses, both as a Marine, as a teacher, as a coach, and now in the role that I fill now. And we work with a team of clinicians, experts in the field. And if you can stall that time frame and get them through, and that's what the bad day plan is. It's going through a process. Okay, if I can't, here's my own way of lowering my temperature, or getting through that bout of depression. If that's not working, who is that trusted person that I can call? You want 1 or 2, and it's somebody that's not going to be judgmental of you. And I say that because I've heard people say, oh, that person was selfish, and they took their own. They weren't selfish. They saw that as the best way to solve their problems, and it's not. But that's what they saw, and you can't fault them for that. That's what they were thinking at the moment. Then it comes down to, what are your reasons for living? Is it your dog? Is it your family? Is it your job? Is it, I have one of the women who said, I wouldn't want my kids to find that. Okay, still a reason. If that's what stops you at that point, that's fine. This is your plan, not mine. And the last part of that is, do you have the resources? Some people will never call. The person we talked about earlier before this started was a veteran that was actually had a gun to his head, and he swore he would never call 988 again because he was a veteran of 3 combat tours, but served as a police officer for 10 years. He called 988 and they sent the police out to him. He's like, I'll never do that again. So, okay, so some people won't use 988, but we also have an organization called Vets for Warriors that we partner with. And they have the phone staff 24/7. They'll go through and they do a Columbia screening, which is a suicide screening. That's one of the first things they'll do. It's all veterans. They'll talk to you. They have resources that they can refer people out to in any state. And they'll even do it to where if you'd like them to call you back once a week just to stay in contact with you, they'll set it up and they'll do that. And that's a peer-to-peer relationship. So yeah, it's the misconception that, I know how to handle a gun is the biggest thing that I get. Yeah, you do. And that's the problem. You have access to it. You know how to handle it. And when you are in a crisis, you don't get a second chance. I've known a couple people that have had a misfire or survived miraculously. And they all have said, I didn't really want to die. But once you've pulled that trigger, you don't get that second chance. Mm-hmm. It is a lot of times a cry for help. And there's people that are dealing with a lot more, but most it's a once and done. You just got to get past that once and done. And what causes that? If we knew what the cause was for each individual person, we'd be mind readers, and we're not. All we can do is provide, one, that it's okay to talk about. We're all human. I steal Brene Brown's piece. She was talking with Special Force people the one day, and she's like, I know they were looking at me like, what's this woman doing here to talk to us? And said, look, I just want to ask you one question. She said, how many of you have ever been vulnerable that required bravery to get through that vulnerability? And she said, it seemed like it was probably, I thought it was like 10 minutes, probably like 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes before finally somebody said, all right, let's get to work. And that is so true, because I don't care whether you're a firefighter running into a burning building, a police officer running into a live shooter situation, or you're a veteran getting ready to hit that line of departure. That whole thing about patriotism goes out the window. When you're at that line of departure, getting ready to go into combat, you're looking to your right and to your left. How do we make sure we all get home to our loved ones? And you are in that brave space at that point, because you are vulnerable, but you've been trained and you have a person on your right and your left that you're counting on. Well, yeah, that's the same type of space we need to provide for people to be able to talk about mental health, because it is something that is treatable. It is something that is curable in all cases, not all, but most all cases. Are you going to eliminate suicide altogether? I don't believe we are, but we certainly can reduce it from the crisis that we're in. And it's, the military, I think the numbers are that much higher just because of the weapons, but it's a crisis across the board. I mean, you see it in all realms of life. There's a lot of stressors out there, and social media doesn't help. There's lots of different factors that go into that today. But having that brave space where you can have that conversation, you can be vulnerable, knowing you're not going to be judged, that you got people that are going to support you. And that's what we try to create, is when we come in, we do a presentation and we do it around a lunch. So community tables, so that we can have conversations. We have a lot of, depending on the size of the group, we have what we call champions. I have 13, 14 different champions around the country that are all trained. They're all veterans, and they've all had lived experience. They've all had suicidal ideations. Some have attempted, some have survived. Obviously they're with us, they survived. But they'll sit at those tables and help the veterans, help them create their plan, help with that conversation. And it's amazing to me how much we had a Vietnam veteran, 80 years old, opened up in this last group we just did in Orange, California, last week. And oh, wow. I've had 74-year-old spouse of a Marine, but attempted suicide in her 30s when she got divorced from her first husband. She said, I've never told anybody. But it opened up the conversations, and that's the important piece. Getting connected, knowing that it's okay. I had a guy come out to my house to take down 2 trees, and he got talking. He said, well, I don't need any of that stuff. I did 2 tours. My dad died of Agent Orange in Vietnam. The VA never took care of him. And as we got talking, 15 minutes later, he's in tears talking about some struggles that he's having. I'm like, being present and listening and asking, how often do you meet somebody and say, hey, how you doing? Great. How you doing? Great. And you go on. But how are you really doing?
Yeah.
How are things going? And then just listen. It's amazing when you are present for people and let them talk, how much more you can learn. And it gives them that freedom to let go sometimes. If they feel comfortable and they feel like they're in that, I don't like the safe space, they feel like they're in that brave space, they have that opportunity to open up and talk about, what they're struggling with. And there are so many resources out there. If it's equine therapy, if it's a service dog, if it's, golf, if it's scuba diving, it's fishing, hiking, there's so many different ways and so many different great organizations out there that we partner with and do different things with, because, hey, it's an extra tool in the tool belt when we're dealing with the service members and the veterans that we're dealing with. And you made a very valid point. Any child that is around a parent that has PTSD, they are going to struggle with PTSD as well. There's lots of research that links what those children deal with based on the parents and the spouses as well. So when we do this, we try to bring in the families, and we don't do it with the younger kids. We'll do it with 16, 18-year-old children. We'll talk about it with, I'm not trained to deal with the younger ones, although I taught kids, that's a whole different realm. Mm-hmm. But the children that are, the brains mature a little bit more and have a little bit better understanding, to be able to do this with them, it's great because they need to understand too. And a lot of times it's, when you're talking about that weapon safety and putting those weapons and those medications in a place that they're not accessible, having the spouses is a plus too, because it gives them that feeling of security, and they're not the ones having to tell their spouse that, hey, you should lock it up. It's somebody else. And then you can work out, there's different ways, there's different plans. We have a resource card that has an organization called WAVE. They have every state listed. Like if you want to store your weapon somewhere else, can a family member take it? What is legal to do in every state? I always say, worst case scenario, take your firing pin from your pistol and give it to somebody else. It's going to render your pistol useless. Simple little techniques, but first and foremost, lock it up. We provide cable locks. If somebody really needs a gun box to lock up weapons or medication, we'll provide that too. Just because whatever we need to do to make sure you're here with us tomorrow, because every life matters. And
absolutely,
I say to everybody, I will tell you, I care about you, because I do. I don't want to lose any more people needlessly. We lose enough of our brothers and sisters in combat and to, medical conditions afterwards, from, you look at Agent Orange cancer to burn pit cancers to unknown things. We already have enough that we lose. We don't need to lose any more needlessly, just because you didn't have somebody to talk to. So please reach out if you ever have that. There's somebody that's willing to listen. And I always say, best for warriors. If you got nobody else, you always got vet for warriors, because that's a fellow veteran's going to pick up that phone and they care about you too.
Yeah. Well, finally, Bob, what legacy do you hope your life of service leaves behind?
We have a personal motto that my wife kind of came up with is, when you're looking and moving through your life, enjoy it as much as you can. Take every day, don't take any day for granted. And as you're progressing through, help as many people along the way as you can. And if I can impact one life, that's a legacy worth living or leaving behind. And I'm very fortunate to work with a foundation where we get to touch thousands of lives every year and get up every day knowing we're making a difference and changing lives. We have some great supporters and great people that we work with, and I'm honored to be able to do this work every day.
All right. Well, I am so glad that you decided to come on the show and share a little bit about your legacy and continuing a legacy with us and the Robert Irvine Foundation. So is there any way that anybody out there that's listening can support the Robert Irvine Foundation? Or
Sure. It's robertirvinefoundation.org. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Robert's on Twitter. If you go on Twitter, you're dealing with Robert. You always know because he never spells anything correctly. People are like, oh, he's got social media team to do some of that stuff, but his Twitter's his LinkedIn is his. That's how actually he and I connected originally on LinkedIn. But yeah, I mean, we have programs all around the country and always like to partner. Food truck programs. We bring veterans back together and their families that serve together, called Reuniting the Brave. We do a few mobility devices every year, a couple service dogs every year. And we do a lot of food programs. Obviously, with Robert, that's one of his passions: food, mental, nutritional, and physical wellness.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your service, for all your dedication to our US of A. I really appreciate it. And I'll be in touch with you about that t-shirt.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Thanks,
All
Bob.
right,
Take care.
Thank you.
Amazing show.
I could have talked to that guy for hours.
Absolutely. And such great life advice
Mhm.
that he gave for those that may be struggling,
Yeah.
especially in heat of the moment things when you're not in your right mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do love the peer-to-peer thing because anybody can call a hotline and speak to somebody that knows nothing about what they've gone into. And I would assume most veterans are, either say, oh, they can't relate to me. I don't want to talk to them.
Mhm.
Or they're too proud to talk to somebody. But knowing that they can talk to somebody that has been through it with them or in similar situations is much better than talking to some random person on a hotline. So
Yeah.
I do love that they have the peer-to-peer connections because I guarantee that would make a bigger impact than talking to just somebody picks up the phone that has never lived that life or gone through boot camp or anything like that. So great programs. And I'm shocked about the food thing still. I can't
Yeah, I can't
imagine.
believe that either. Because I mean, well, Craig said it in the chat too, but there used to be these standards that I don't think they've foregone the standards, but I mean, our food in America is poison. If you look
Absolutely.
at it, like
That is
not very few people are eating what they call clean eating, essentially,
correct.
where we're not adding garbage into our food, because even our, our chicken and everything, we have hormones injected into our meat.
Yep.
So it's changing things. And
You don't know where it comes from. And the USDA is corrupt as well. It's
crazy. Well,
it's all about money. It ties into the pharmaceutical industry and doctors who, I'm not going to say all doctors, but honestly,
yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
sick, if you're not sick, they're not going to have a job.
Well,
So
and Craig had also mentioned too that usually when you join the military, they're stick figures, and then they go through the workout routine and all the food and everything they're put through, and they come out like these big buff bad men. And that's what you see
most do.
typically in the movies too, is
Yeah.
anybody that's serving our country are these big, rough, tough, buff men that
Yeah,
can
I'm not going to
protect
go
our
there.
country.
Expect to go through boot
But yeah,
camp. I mean,
I mean, you made up a good point. If we've got people that are actively serving and they get called out to duty and they're not fit for duty, that's not really going to be good on either side. So,
Yep.
I'm glad that the Robert Irvine Foundation is kind of stepping in and trying to help families out where need be. And then you have those families that, they go off for deployment for a couple of years, come back, they have a year off, and then, in that year's time, they could maybe gain some weight because of PTSD, or gain some weight because
Sure.
they get depressed, or they're lonely, or I've known a couple where they leave for deployment, they come back, their wives decide they're going to leave them, or their girlfriend, and then they go into depression mode, and then they get called out again, and they've gained all this weight or gotten extremely unhealthy, and then you're starting from scratch. So
Yeah.
it is something definitely that needs to be looked into for sure. But anyways, with that being said, next week we have another veteran. We have veterans for the next 2 weeks, I think.
Line them up.
I know, they're becoming my favorite. Next week we have Danny Science. I think I'm saying his name right. He lives in Texas. He works at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. You know what that one is?
Say that 5 times fast.
Mm-hmm. He's a former AMEDD Corps Chief Proponent Officer at U.S. Army Medical Center of Excellence. He was a former Human Resources Specialist, HR Specialist at Veterans Benefits Administration. He worked at Fort Sam Houston Army Base and worked at the 302nd Signal Battalion, and worked at the U.S. Army Civilian Career Management Activity, ACCMA. So he was also... Yes, he worked at the United States Army Medical Command as well. So another decorated veteran that we're going to have on the show that is still serving his country in another way. So I'm excited to talk to Danny. And he also, aside from being a veteran, has he lost his brother, I think a little over a year ago, maybe almost 2 years. And so I think we'll touch base on that a little bit as well. So yeah, we have a couple of veterans coming up in the next few weeks. And Craig. Oh, well, I guess Craig will be watching the show next week. He trained at Fort Sam. But yeah, we have some veterans. I made a post in the private Facebook group page the other day that we are so close to 200 subscribers. I really want to hit that by the end of the year. We have a couple weeks left. And so I'm really trying to push for that. And that's just a small goal of mine I have. But I had 3 people respond to me the other day about wanting to be on the show.
Nice.
By the time they got back to me, those spots were filled.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you're filling them up very quickly.
Yeah. So we're booked till March. For anybody listening, we're fully booked till March, and I still have a lineup of 18 more guests already. So,
wow.
I mean, unless somebody cancels or we need a last minute fill in, or I start booking March here, I'll probably start booking March here in January-ish sometime. Give myself a month off of booking people. Then reach out and let me know if you want to be on the show. I still have a list of people that I want to contact that have some pretty good, unique stories. But if you do think you have a good and unique story that's tailored to our podcast, please reach out to me, either on my private Facebook page or my private Facebook page, or the group's private Facebook page, Reset and Rise to the Unbreakable on Facebook, or you can email us at resetandrisepodcast@gmail.com. It's still a mouthful. Every time somebody asks me, I'll copy and paste in the brains up there back in the filing cabinets. So anyways, but you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and this episode will be available this Thursday on all audio podcast platforms. So with that being said, we really appreciate all of you guys being here and tuning in with us tonight, and anybody that listens after. This episode will be able to be restreamed directly after the show is aired. Brunswick, keep promoting it. You've got a large audience. Oh, Craig. Thanks, Craig. I hope Brunswick's listening. If not, I'll make sure he sees that comment. Actually, I've talked to Brunswick about coming back on the show next summer, so we'll talk about that. Good. Hopefully.
I just had him on my bowling show, and man, he's such a good dude.
It was fantastic. Yeah. That show could have went on forever too.
It could have.
Oh, thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. I try.
Yeah, Nick's a good guy. He's a super, super good guy. And I really loved like how much he knows about bowling. As a bowling nerd, he's so smart when it comes to
and tomorrow night you guys have Guppy Troop on the show.
We do. We have Guppy Troop. It's Straight Up 5 if you want to watch on our YouTube channel, Straight Up 5 podcast.
Plug your podcast into my podcast.
I don't ever do. Yeah, I don't.
That's okay.
I don't like to do that, but
you're okay. It's all right. You guys have plugged mine. So
Straight Up 5 is our bowling show, which streams every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel, and we have the 2026 nominee for the PBA Hall of Fame, Guppy Troop, whose son is Kyle Troop, who we've had Kyle on the show a couple times too. But Tom Clark just announced this past weekend that Guppy was going into the veterans category for his 50 combined titles between the regional PBA and his 8 national titles. So it's well deserved. Super nice guy. Always dressed eclectically like Kyle does.
Oh, yeah. Very.
And I'm super excited to have him on the show tomorrow.
He reminds me of the guy in Kingpin.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe it was modeled after him. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of, because I am a huge fan of the Straight Up 5 podcast, that's how this podcast got started. For people that don't know, but I have some very big name bowlers I'm working on getting on the show for 2026, and I'm super excited. So hopefully I can make that happen. One of them in particular, I have to probably wait until the PBA tour season is done, just because they're a little bit too busy at that point to be on a podcast. But anyways, so thanks everybody for tuning in. Rob, thanks for all you do. I really do appreciate it. And that was an awesome show. And I just want to say personally, thank you to everybody that has served our country. I definitely, like I've said before, I definitely have a soft spot for veterans in particular. I don't think that we're doing enough for them. I think we need to do more. So anyways, if you want to help out the Robert Irvine Foundation, go ahead and robertirvinefoundation.org and help them out there. So we will see you guys all next week at, what did I say last week? The same awful time, the same amazing place or same awesome place, whatever it was.
Something
It
like
was
that. You got to come up with
whatever. It was funny. I got to come up with
Yeah.
something.
come up with a good catchphrase.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys all next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care, guys.